Greetings, YouTube. This is the Garage Autonomist. Day tonight, rather being a little late, starting this. Had a lot of house cleaning stuff to do, So I needed to take care of those things first. All right. So let me go ahead and get started here. Uh, no idea why. Okay, I know what's going on. Kids are off tomorrow from school and they're hogging up all the bandwidth. Okay. Well, let me go ahead and get started here. So, we're talking about jobs that we've had. I'm going to start off by talking about mine. At 17 years old, my mother, I remember her sitting me down and in a hushed and very dramatic tone that should have said that she was going to talk to me about using condoms or some shit. She instead says, "We need to talk about a job." Now, my mother had been working since she was my age at the time. And so the logic went that although I was still in school, I needed to have some kind of income as kids became a different expense altogether. What with having bigger bodies, bigger appetites, wanting shit like clothes and music and other trinkets. But that was fine. It made sense because I did have music that I wanted to buy. I did have books that I would like to keep buying and other things like that. And so yeah, it was time to get a job. Now, if you had asked my younger self, why wasn't I smiling and happy at the age of 18 with me being young, no responsibilities, still living at home with a steady job, I would have punched you in the face. Not that I would have been, not that I would have been right to do so, and I would have been very much unjustified for that. And I myself would have clocked my younger self for having this misplaced anger because I did have a steady job, but I had wrongheadedly embraced Marxism of all things for the dumbest of reasons. I thought that this was because I was experiencing struggle as stupid as that fucking actually sounded at the time. But the diners in the restaurant that I had worked in by the time I was 17 and now my first year working there, they were in no way members of the 1%. They were workers too, trying to have a good time with their families, if to take their minds off of a shitty day, a stressful year, and not knowing what would come next for them, sorry, in an age where their economic futures lay in the hands of an aging ex Hollywood actor with an onset of Parkinson's, overseeing death squads in Central America, a major crack injection in the Black and Latino neighborhoods across America, and also the economic future was in the hands of coke snorting, testosterone chugging douche boys of Wall Street. This was, after all, the mid 1980s. I see that I was mad, but not understanding about what. In my present day, I understand it now. I was mad because I knew that my life as being part of the social class, the working class, was different from other kids who, when they had turned into their late teens, would be radically different. Their parents probably were, like who I am as a parent now, would be talking about college to their kids or a trip overseas or possibly safe sex. Well, that chore I leave to my wife. I was bitter about my predicament, but it was a bit misguided. If anything, I really was in a good place. I was just too young, lazy, and stupid to see it at the time. But I was a line cook. for a family restaurant, and it was a family restaurant and sports bar. That's what it was at the time. Uh, it was in the very beginning years of what would later be known to Houstonians as the Richmond Strip. Now, in my day, it was our restaurant, Birdie's. It was Sam's Boat, a strip joint called La Bear. There was Ruth Steaks Steakhouse further up. Was that up or down Richmond? It would be up, further up Richmond, and a whole bunch of other little restaurants in between. Also, Taco Cabana had just opened up around that time, and it was a different game altogether. I mean, the Richmond Strip. When by that time my wife and I were married, and we kind of drove through there just to see what was up, and it just looked completely different from what I remembered when I was a teenager working at Birdie's. Which by the time we were pregnant with, my wife was pregnant with our oldest daughter, uh, my old restaurant was already bulldozed into a parking lot. Now, the place that I had worked at, was famous for its chicken fried steaks. What you get is a beef cube steak. That's the only steak I ever knew growing up in the household that I grew up in. And it was dipped in a buttermilk batter. Then it was dredged in flour to be pounded out in a long steel pan by hand. Then it was dipped into buttermilk batter again. And then it was pounded out some more, and then you had tossed it into a deep fryer, almost the way that you spin a pizza crust with the tip of your finger, and you cooked it till it was brown. And when you brought it out of the grease, it was always shaped like a catcher's mitt, but the same size of the plate served on. And you had to actually push it off to the side a little bit so it'd be hanging off the side of the damn plate so that you could put the french fries on the plate. And then, of course, on top of it all, we had put that nasty white biscuit gravy that I never understood its popularity among rednecks and hillbillies. But they love that shit. It's like they're crack or something. I never brown gravy. Let me check the real quick and see. Yeah, I didn't think so. Yeah, see, when I'm late, oh, baby Moscato. Hey, what's up, baby Moscato? Hold on. At first, I didn't see you in there, man. My internet is lazy tonight, and I know why. Because they ain't got school tomorrow, so they're normally there. Hey, what's up, Penny? So let me just finish this off. Anyway, so now this place had been my hell. It was a fast place. It was a fast paced situation. I was humping baskets of cut blanched fries by two hands to drop in the fryer. But at this time, I learned about people. It was a very, very important time in my life. My coworkers were all the people who grew up in the late 60s, early 70s. In other words, these were the parents of the Gen Yers and the older millennials who at that time uh, were supposed to be like adults to me or like adult figures or like older siblings, but they were really aging partiers. Like each of these people were a lesson in bad life decisions, but they were still good people the same. And the job taught me discipline. I went from being a prep cook who moved like a sloth, and I was a liability to anybody back there who I was working with. And then later on, I had moved on to a line cook when once I had started to get some moves, and when I was able to go toe to toe with my Mexican coworkers in speed and in repetition of the dinners that we were making. And then when my former shift leader, who was sort of like the kitchen version of Sam Malone from Cheers, had got busted for stealing some damn beer from the bar, Apparently he had been doing it. I know that he'd been doing it for like months. And finally the general manager caught him, and he caught him on a night that I was off. Um, being that I was somebody who also benefited from my former boss's thievery. That kicked me up to his old shift, and that's how I took over the pit. And at that point, my responsibility was doing food inventory at the end of the shift. But during the shift, I was cooking steaks, and there was nobody to teach me, by the way. I had to learn by coming in as early as possible, to learn from our chief, or the head cook at the time was Rosalie. She worked the day shift, and she pretty much ran the kitchen. Like, she did all the lunch specials, and she also, of course, ran the pit. And the pit was, this built-in brick pit. We used mesquite wood to cook on, and we had one of those grills that you lower with a handle and a chain and a wheel. And that's pretty much it. Like, that's how I learned how to cook, and that's what I was doing. And it was what it was. It was a huge learning experience for me at the time, and I'll get into details with that when I put out the actual story of when I did my time at Birdie's. So going back to the chat, Penny Proud says she'll be right back. Baby Moscato says, I love your videos. I think she was talking about Penny. So what's up, Baby Moscato? What's going on? The thing is, now, this past Saturday, Angela did a video herself called The People Who Work in the Kitchen. And it was a good video. It did remind me of the chapter from Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain when he talked about who are typically cooks. And yeah, besides very hardworking immigrants, and I give anybody who tries to come into this country their due. They work harder than most Americans. They just do. And that's really where a lot of my work ethic came from, by the way. It always came from my Mexican coworkers. And but besides those people, like trying to get away from abject poverty from where they're from, uh it's kind of true that most people who wind up in service industry are usually the weirdos and the fuck ups and people who just can't really function anywhere else. It is a bit of a stereotype, but man, it was like I said, I didn't become a pit cook until that guy, my former boss, got caught stealing beer. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it worked for me. Like, you had waitresses who come in there and flash their titties so that you can you could like get their food up quicker. Like, it was all, like it was crazy. And I'm not trying to say all of them were fucked up. I met some pretty straight laced people as well. In terms of the wait staff, whereas just in terms of the waitresses, there was always these British students during the summer. I'd say around springtime. There was all, and the reason why I'm speaking so vaguely about them, because maybe 1 or 2 years it might be the same girls, but then 2 years later it would be a completely pair, and they were always from the UK. I never understood that. I think it's because the restaurant I worked in, like I said, it was a family-based restaurant, and it was also a sports bar. But with I guess I don't know if it was the green and white color scheme of the place, or the fact that maybe it had a kind of Irish thing to it. But the point is that it was weird that British or European students who were off of school back home would come to America, where you thought that they were here to just go on vacation, but they were really just coming here. Well, they were on vacation, I guess, they vacation differently during their vacation, which is not completely strange because that's how my wife dealt with Europe. You know, she bars and restaurants, bars and restaurants. She's softening up, by the way, on the idea of coming here on this channel to do and to be interviewed this summer. She's softening up on that. So maybe we'll get her to talk a little bit about her time working in Europe and Israel. But anyway, going to me. So I mean, not everybody was fuck ups. That's definitely the truth. I mean, I don't think that I really was one, but I mean, I never really got up to a lot of crazy shit. All I did between rushes at work at night was I'd sit on the little stoop, that little stool that I had over in my station, be reading down and out in Paris. Was it Paris in England? I think it was called. That was the George Orwell book about his time working in a restaurant, which I thought was very, which I thought was very fitting for me to read at the time. And it was also funny because the movie Repo Man had come out around that year. And I, for some reason, kind of identified and paired my time working at Birdie's as a cook with the Repo Man character because this shit was just strange around that time. Not strange like in the movie, but you know what I'm saying. Let's see here what the chat is saying. Love, Light, and Truth 11. Hey, what's up? Boom. Baby Moscato says, I'm doing well tonight. I'm doing well tonight. I tried to jump on, but so tired tonight. That's fine, baby. That's fine. Baby Moscato, sorry. Hey, Curious. Curious is here. If she wants to join, I hope she does. You know, she can click on the thing. Jenny, what's up, Jenny? Baby Moscato says that would be great to hear your wife. Yeah, she actually hinted that she's ready to do it. And a funny story is attached to that. I never told y'all this story. I'm gonna tell y'all this story real quick, even though it's off topic. See, before y'all, right? I did this channel. I started this channel in the fall of 2015. You wouldn't know that because I actually made private the first video of this channel because I hated it that much compared to what I've done, you know, later on. But in November 2015, right? Well, this is what happened. 2 years before I did this channel, my wife was like, she was saying, hey, I really think we should do a podcast. I really think we should do a podcast. You know, and her thing was that she wanted to do a podcast on parenting. Now, rather than actually, and I think I may have told this story, rather than actually being a mature adult human being and sitting down and talking to my wife in full detail about what she was envisioning, I kind of blew it off because then my feeling was I'm living the life of a parent. Why the fuck would I want to talk some more about it? So I kind of just didn't say that to her, you know, to her face. Instead, I was like, oh yeah, you know, doing that polite, you know, stringing her along type of thing. And at the time, I wasn't thinking about doing anything on my own, like doing a YouTube channel or nothing like that. Then a year later, I was beginning to think about doing a YouTube channel. The idea originally was to do a podcast and just simply take the finished product and upload it to YouTube. But who really wants to look at a blank screen on you goddamn podcast? So that's how come I decided to go full on and make YouTube videos with visuals and stuff. My point is that I did a video that I did the first Autonomist Lounge series was about radical and anti-authoritarian parenting. And then I thought about it and it clicked in my mind. I was like, oh shit, talking about. So when I got the idea that it would be good for her to try to come on to the channel one time, I just got a flat out no. And I put two and two together and figured, oh, she must be pissed off about the podcast idea. Turns out, when she finally did say a couple of weeks ago, hey, I think I would like to appear on your channel, maybe after, because my daughter's been on here. And then when I said, oh man, like you didn't want to do it, the reason why she did the flat out no is because, again, professionally, it's not like her voice would be instantly recognized or anything like that. But I think it's about really like talking or something, kind of like the way my daughter was the first time after she heard herself, with the first time she appeared here on this channel. And so that's what she was thinking. So that's what I thought, but I was wrong about that. And then, so then, it was that's what happened there. So let me go back up in the chat a little bit and see where we left off. Jenny's here. Hello, Jenny. Curious says, hi, Jenny. Pure Butterfly Spirit. Hey, Garage. Hello, all. Jenny says, hey, Curious. Curious says, why, thank you, Garage. That's because I was okay. And then Curious says, Jenny Kiss, girl, what's good? How's the baby? Curious says, that's interesting. Is she also an anarchist? No, Curious. My wife, well, it depends. My wife, I don't know how my wife would describe herself. She may not want to describe herself as an anarchist because she feels that she too, like I did, sold out to the man. But as I would rather claim being a libertarian socialist or a left communist, because it just sounds more like I'm still more worker oriented and therefore not a pure anarchist. It makes me feel a lot better not to identify myself as the latter. I'm pretty sure she might describe herself as the same. I don't know. We'll find out when she comes on. Jenny Kiss says, so good. We went through all this crazy genetic scare recently, but we found out that our baby boy is actually going to be a girl. Jenny, really want to hear some more about that for real, because I thought you were going to have a boy too. Jenny says, I want to hear the wife as well. Baby Moscato, laughing. Curious says, I would have been interested in hearing about the anti-authoritative parenting. Curious says, the deep analysis of the family unit and domestication of women. Curious says she told him off. I thought she was going to, Curious. I thought she was going to tell me off. Curious says, I know daughter feels I'm scared to call into shows and call into hangouts. Oh, right. She's talking about my daughter. Baby Moscato says, good night, everyone. I'll comment tomorrow. I apologize for not being able to jump on. That's fine, Baby Moscato. That's fine. You will always, just like Curious and everyone else here, will always have an open mic to jump on at any time. So Curious says, are you libertarian? Hold on. No. Curious, I'm left libertarian. There's a difference. The right libertarians are they're just anti-government conservatives is all they are, really. Curious says, the baby isn't born yet? Oh, hell no. She's still got a ways to go, Curious. Curious said, you liberal socially but fiscally conservative? Oh, no, she's still trying to figure that out. Okay. All right. So, yeah, I think we're all caught up here. So, this is the thing, man. I don't regret at all that I was in. I mean, the thing is that being in that area of work at the time really shaped me and prepared me for other things in life. Because obviously, I mean, I went from that to being a cook, then I went into industrial work. Now, I'm going to be writing about that as well, but I went into working in a plant that was a fabrication plant. And what we did in that place was that we made these utility toolboxes. Now, to probably give you a better example or an idea of what that is and what that means, it's basically these long boxes that go in the back of pickup trucks, right? They usually open with a latch. They kind of flip up on both sides. They're usually white or they might be aluminum. Um, I didn't I didn't make those. I wasn't a welder, but I did start off there as a welder's helper. Um, we also made what you call utility body sides. Now those go on the trucks that they're welded together on a flat, uh, like a 12 gauge, a higher gauge of metal, of diamond sheet metal, right? And those go on the back of trucks as well, but rather they are the truck bed. And on either side of them are these cabinets. One cabinet might be a lot of hooks that were welded on the inside, and then you had like the main door that flips down, and then on the other one another cabinet. Typically, if you live in Houston, at the time, your company there was actually called the Houston Lighting and Power before it became, I think, Enron. Those were the trucks that they used. These were the guys that went, the people that went into your neighborhoods either to turn off your lights or to do major electrical repair, say after a storm. So we made those boxes. As I said, I started there as a welder's helper. Then I moved on to working on the paint line. And then my favorite time when I was working there was 2 years straight helping with the water treatment, because when you're on the paint line, right, the paint would have to go against, or the waste of the paint, which is basically at that point a mix of dust and paint, would have to go against the wall. And instead of it just going on a wall, what it went was against a wall that was shooting out water. So it was called a water wall. And that water would feed into a tank. But so you're talking about a tank that was full of, paint waste or dried paint waste. And that water, of course, had to be treated before it would be released into these major underground tanks, which then that water would be released into the city. Now, that water, before it went into the city, was not like water that went into drinking water. That water would then go into whatever paths it takes in the sewage, not in the sewage, but whatever it went to. Houston Water Works would take it, and then they would have to treat it, because you're talking about water that has paint in it, xylene. That's a very powerful paint remover. So that time was very interesting. The guy that actually did that job was an Indian gentleman. He obviously had a degree in chemistry in order for him to have that job, but he was again typical capitalist. The family that owned this plant, he was the only one doing this work, and it wasn't just him mixing chemicals. It was a lot of heavy, grueling physical work, and the dude actually got hernia from doing it. So that's when they pulled me off the paint line. They always saw me reading books and shit. They figured, okay, that's the guy you want helping you. He said, yeah. And and so yeah, because we had to mix things like cyanide, things that would go into the big washer tanks that we had. Painted had to get washed first. So there was the treatment of the water. We had a water tower that I had to go up into. This was probably the hottest summer in Houston around this time. It was like the summer of 90, was summer of 94, 95, 96. So we're talking average 95-degree weather. And I was working outside, but I wanted to. Like, that's what I'm talking about. This was the happiest time of my life because I was glad to get off the paint line. And I was out there in the sun. It was hot as hell. The the water treatment tower was open, so there was no roof to it. And the actual floor of the tower was uh was stainless steel, you know. And in the middle of that was this big, cut hole where there was all this water that we would pump up from the waste. And in that water, I would have to take a big bucket with sulfuric acid, if my memory serves me. It was sulfuric acid, uh, of cups of what was called polymer, which was a powderized plastic, basically. And you would have to, in order to separate the waste, like the paint waste, from the regular water. And then you would have to pour it back in that tower and it would go into these tanks. And what would happen was is that you would get this separation of this fake paste of paint and dust and shit that we then would put into these large 50 gallon drums, which of course would get shipped off to Houston Waste. And then the water element is what would get pumped into these, into whatever it was. Like I said, it was a special underground tank or some shit that then after that, the Houston Water Works would take that so they could treat it. But no, it didn't. It was not drinking water into the major drinking water, which is a very good question that Pure Butterfly Spirit asked. But I will say this, Pure Butterfly Spirit, the company that I worked at, that company, we're going to call it R&K. That company did get fined for millions of dollars by the city because it did a violation that was close to what I was, that was in the area of what I was doing. But that was years after I left. An article was written about them and everything. But fuck that company. They did. I mean, you talking about people that were getting away with murder off of somebody's labor. You got to understand, man. Everybody who worked in that plant, if you were a former convict, right? You were somebody like someone who just was, never got in trouble with the law, but hell, man, I got paid every weekend. I was off every weekend. The money was good. And that's that's the job that I had when I moved out, when I finally moved out. Place and everything. It was good. It was an easy job. It was easiest job I had really, in all the jobs I've had. But yeah, what was I about to say? I was talking about working there, and so yeah, but after I had left there, this major legal issue with something in the water place. Good Butterfly Spirit says that Vegas municipal water smells like strong chloride. But I don't think any place where we live, Pure, I know our water is fucked up. I just know it is. You know what I'm saying? Oh, Brooklyn's in the house. What's up, Brooklyn? How you doing? Here, that is a strong woman, ladies and gentlemen. You talking somebody who puts up with bullshit from her lessers. Person who's ever said anything about her is exactly her lessers. I'm not even going to go into details, but peace to Brooklyn. And yeah, so I mean, let's see. Oh wait, so Curious says I feel like In your heart, you may be an anarcho primitive. Ah, yeah, curious. I actually went through that phase, but it was really not even a phase because you have to live that life in order to go through that phase. I think I have romanticized the idea, but I'm the complete opposite. I believe that libertarian socialism should be able to bring us Star Trek. Anyway, um, Pure Butterfly Spirit says water is death nowadays. I agree, Pure Butterfly Spirit. And plus, on top of that, you know what's ironic? In order for you to drink decent water, you have to buy all that goddamn plastic. That's what's so fucked up. Curious says, but technology is not sustainable. Well, the technology that we use now is not sustainable. I think it can be at some point. Yeah, I think it can be here. So let's see what the chat is saying. Curious is, but technology is not sustainable. I already said that. But what got you out of the AP? Oh, Arrington birdies. What got me out of the? Well, I guess you're asking what got me out of the industry and what got out of the industrial job. Well, what got me out of the industrial job was two things. Okay, because I'm missing a huge swath of my past years, and before the industrial job, I would to get my shit together and go to school. Right now, again, this is another one of those things about my younger self that I should have clocked. I would have clocked my younger self for because I was so. What got me out of the anarcho primitive thought? I think it's because I had to be realistic, curious. I like technology. I do think that right now it's a horrible burden on our environment, but it doesn't have to be. It really doesn't. Everything in terms of most of what we use in our technology anyway is mostly plastic. Plastic is recyclable, so we just need to start using recyclable. Am I using the right term? Recyclable. Anyway, recyclable plastic to house our computers and phones. We just need to do it. It's not a matter of it can't be done. It can be. We just need to do it. But anyway, yeah. But that's where I'm. But that's what I'm on about that. Yeah. Okay. So we're clear on that. I was saying I would have punched my younger self or shook my younger self in terms of because I was so. It wasn't even that I was insecure about going to college when I should have because I did go ahead and fill out school loans ultimately to get into electronic engineering, which is what I did. I went to a trade school to learn electronic engineering. The whole point really was to become uh, a computer repair person. I had to learn assembly language, i.e., machine language. We had to learn back in those days. It was DOS. I mean, DOS is still used, but rarely. Um, and I did. I got my associates in that. It was a fly by night company, but at least the degree was real. And that's when I left the restaurant. Here's the thing: the school that I was going to was working with compact computers in terms of job placement. Right. The thing about the thing about um, the thing about that was that you unless you were already uh how can I put this? Unless you were already working there a year ago, 5 years ago, you were probably going to be there by on contract. So you were, even if you were fine, what we did was we were putting circuit boards together. But Compaq Computers had already decided that they were going to ship that part of their labor off to Vietnam, or I mean, whatever they went, Indonesia, I forgot. The point here is that we all were in danger of losing our jobs. Now, my feeling was I had left the restaurant business to work in an industry that I had gone to school for, only to learn that there was no real industry. There was nothing to do other than if I had decided to say, uh, just really go into business for myself as a computer technician, you know, to fix, to fix motherboards and shit like that. And we weren't at that point in time back in those days where people, if a motherboard was damaged or circuit boards are burnt out or bullshit like that, like in those days, like in these days now, people just replace them because most companies that buy computers, uh, buy computers under a certain contract where it's like, look, if something is bad or broken down, we just give you the part and we just send it to you. And as long as it's within warranty, you don't pay for it. So nobody really bothers with hiring computer technicians anymore. Not really. That's one of the reasons why. So you're talking about the earlier part, first phase of my uh, career, which I'm now in the technology field now. But the first phase of that was when I was a hardware jockey. That was the first job that I got coming out, and it wasn't going to be a stable one. It wasn't going to be something where I could be working 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years. And it was pretty obvious. So all we were doing at that time was working with the printed boards and putting them together. Um, and then it was like I was working for 8 months at a time, shit like this. So that's when I was like, fuck it. I saw an ad in the paper for the company R&K, and that's when I started. I went into industry. It made absolutely no sense to my mother. She was like, I don't, you paid all that money, you took out a loan for this school, and you're not even in the field that you're working in. And I was like, I didn't even have anything to say about it because she was right. Curious machine language. She says, I'm so proud of you. I remember them, Dell and Toshiba. Exactly. Compaq was the company. They had a special deal with the school that I attended. So to kind of give the students this delusion of, oh, you've graduated and now you're going to start your shiny career in technology, Compaq had that deal with them. So anyway, the in so the fabrication plant for, like I said, half the workforce was immigrants, the other half were former convicts, and even then, speaking of company deals, that company obviously had a deal with the Texas Parole Board because almost everyone I worked with were former convicts, and this is not a put down; it's just the truth. Like almost everyone in there, had done time in the pen. They did good enough time to where when they got out, uh, the parole board was like, look, hey, we have a job for you. You learned because in those days, if you did go to prison, you actually did come out with some kind of a skill. So, and some of those guys all came out knowing the very basics of welding, and that's typically who was all working there. And I could have stuck with being a welder myself, but I don't know. It just wasn't appealing to me at the time. I mean, you talking about the one guys in our job who had to hump, although they were making really good money and deservedly so because when they had to work, when they were putting the boxes together and stuff like that, they were getting paid by the finished piece. That's how they were getting paid. So they really had to move and picking up, the 10 gauge and 12 gauge metal pieces to weld them together to make a goddamn box. Like, that's no fun feat. And all of them were working by themselves. The only job that I had really with working with the guy that I was working with was making sure his equipment was right, that the flux was applied to the weld, and just moving shit around for him. That was pretty much about it. Pure butterfly spirit. Oh no, Curious says anytime a school has an N, I'm suspicious. As well, you should be Curious. Curious also says one of the big cosmetology schools closed down. They were offering those deals too. Exactly. Pure Butterfly Spirit says, Garage, I'm reading toothpaste ingredients. Do you think we're being told the truth about the product ingredients now these days? Yeah, and Brooklyn T Corner says no, Pure Butterfly Spirit. I agree with both of y'all. No. I think, well, let me put it to you this way. I think from what I've read, all I'm reading is a bunch of chemical crazy shit. So to some degree, I do believe we're getting the truth. I think that unless you buy Tom's toothpaste, which as we all know, you might as well be sending a kid to college. Like, it's the most nastiest tasting toothpaste in the world, but it's the most natural toothpaste. Unless we're talking about Tom's toothpaste and the ingredients they got in that shit, and if they're lying about that, then I would say that would be true. But I mean, if I look at a tube of toothpaste now and it's got all the crazy chemicals in it, I think they're telling the truth. In other words, they're not trying to sell you nothing healthy here. They're selling you chemicals that's just there to make your teeth look white. So that can't be a good thing. You might as well just brush your teeth with Clorox. Pure Butterfly Spirit says, I think you're right, Brooklyn. It's very scary. Brooklyn says, strangely, I don't like the taste of toothpaste, to be honest. I kind of do, but I'm just weird. Curious is they use chemical names to describe natural things like salt, though. They now use that language. Curious says going through my hair products has been a nightmare. Pure Butterfly Spirit says I buy Tom's fluoride free. Yeah, I think that if you can afford it, I personally that's probably it's messed up with. This is what's messed up about me. I I like I just said, I like to take the taste of toothpaste, but I know that the shit that I'm using is bad. But Tom's toothpaste is the healthy alternative in that they use natural ingredients, but I cannot stand Tom's toothpaste. I feel like I'm brushing my teeth with bathroom caulk. It's just it's like the nastiest tasting shit in the world, man. Um Brooklyn T Corner says, I'd rather brush my teeth with barbecue sauce. Exactly. Curious says the things sold to black women for our hair is a nightmare. Yeah, I would agree, Curious. I can only imagine. I can only imagine the shit that women are sold, period, but black women in particular, like the chemicals for the hair, it can't be good. It can't be good. And it isn't. I mean, not everybody's built the same. We've seen horror stories. We've seen women's scalps burning and peeling off their skin, like I mean, off their heads, like because their natural body chemistry is reacting horribly to these other crazy ass chemicals used to straighten their hair. Like it's a nightmare. See, Pure Butterfly Spirit says I was making my own toothpaste, but didn't like the taste of it. Same with deodorant. When I was little, my great grandmother, being that she was a child of the Depression, used to make us brush our teeth with baking soda. Now, I actually like doing that. So, in other words, when we ran out of toothpaste, she would bust out with the Arm and Hammer, which, by the way, was actually pretty tasty. I actually like brushing my teeth with Arm and Hammer. So, like, I may actually do that tomorrow morning. Pure Butterfly says my deodorant works good, but they chafe my underarms. Do you use these? Do you use the Tom's brand Butterfly Spirit? Well, y'all, 11:37. Wait, Brooklyn T Corner says garage. Also, it depends. Relaxers are not supposed to be in your hair for more than 5 to 10 minutes. That's true. Hey, Phoenix, what's up? So I got about 10 minutes left. But it's fun. Like I said, it was those were the jobs, at least of my past. I barely talk about my time at Compact because it wasn't even worth talking about. And but it was what it was. So yeah, but like while I was at the industrial place, R&K, while I was working there, uh, it's a hobby for me. So when I made enough money to start buying, I bought a to that. It was the Mac Perform 700 series. I started learning more as much as I could. First, it was graphic design. That was more of a hobby, and and I was learning as much as I could about layout and things like that. So I moved on to a digital print place. That's where I started working there because they and and I was I'm not trying to blow my own horn here, but I was smart. I figured if print places were going digital, I knew that kind of made, and this is a shitty thing to do, but I knew that anyone who worked in a printing place and they weren't working with a computer had no idea what to do. And so I just started, rewriting my resume. I took Birdie's, the restaurant, off of my resume altogether. And I just only left the industrial thing because I wanted to show that I understood production, or working in a production based environment, which is not that far from a print shop. And so when I went in and told them I knew how to work, I knew Quark Express. I knew, well, back then Photoshop didn't exist. The earliest version of Photoshop was actually was created by a company called Aldus. So it's called Aldus Darkroom, I think it was called. But if you look at the old layout of Aldus Darkroom, it in Photoshop then was bought. Adobe bought Aldus, and then that's when they created Photoshop. So I learned all that stuff by myself. So yeah. Now going back to the chat. Okay, so Brilliant T. Corner says, I have stories for days about the bummy jobs I took. I'm a legit hustler like my parents. Yep, I understand that. Curious says, you do such a good job. I love the cog. Thank you, Curious. Phoenix says, oh, GA, come on, don't split up now. Oh, don't split now. I have a mason tender. I was a mason tender once. Cement and more cement. Ah, shit. Yeah, that's you had Phoenix. Yeah, you guys are putting down the wire mesh bar and then laying the cement down, and then only to see your work vandalized the next day by kids drawing hearts or peepees and wee wees and shit in the cement later. Uh, let's see here. Curious says, was it Corral Draw? I remember Corral Draw. I forgot. I don't know who acquired Corral, but they did. But Corral did become something else, but I can't remember. Phoenix says, GA, I started restaurant work at 15 as a hostess. I ducked at it. I sucked at it, I guess, is what she's saying. And they booted me into the kitchen. Yeah, you know what, Phoenix? That happened to one girl at my job. She wasn't a hostess though, because we weren't that kind of structure at the restaurant I worked at. But she was I don't know, man. They normally they just fire a waitress if she's horrible. But for this particular woman, and she was really young too, they just said, no, I think you'll be okay being a prep cook. I didn't understand that at all. I think the rumor was that she was probably the niece of the owner, or some kind of distant relative of the owner, and that's why they took mercy on her and threw her in the kitchen, which was on purpose because after that they figured between the leering, sexually harassing other cooks in there, and people just being over, just outright mean to her, she would just quit. And the fast pace of the kitchen. And it's true, she did. She couldn't handle it. But nobody harassed her though. But she just couldn't handle it. So oh right, she said she sucked at it. That's what she said. Phoenix says, I worked a lot of different jobs. Also, Brooklyn says, also, I love your work as well, Garage. Very relaxing and entertaining to hear you speak. Thank you, Brooklyn. Pure Butterfly Spirit says, jobs I hated, but I did to raise my daughter. Yeah. Phoenix says, it was all good though. Hey, check out Chef Orel. Yes, I'm subscribed to Chef Orel here on YouTube, and he's in Dubai. Thank you guys. Pure Butterfly Spirit says my voice is calming. Yeah, Chef Orel, I like his channel. And it's one of those things where there's people that I'm subscribed to, and you wish for the best for them to be able to do the kinds of stuff you kind of wish they would do, like cooking videos. But I know that the guy has a like he's got real work to do. And to do a channel like that, I would love to do a cooking channel, to be honest with you. I would love to do a crafts channel. Like I wouldn't mind going and dropping about $2,000 worth of tools and make knives and shit, and do a video on that. But I do a channel on that. But I know what it takes to do stuff like that. It's really sort of a you know on the pot to piss kind of situation. If you do a channel like that, you really got to have the time and dedication to do it, and it's hard to do it if you're a full-time worker and a full-time parent. Curious says, my friends lived overseas, and she says that wait staff in Marxist style countries are not going to bend over backwards like here. Yeah, that's true. I've noticed that most people who actually do work in the service industry are not the most leftist friendly people. I think that there's been a horrible um, connection between when an economy is really good, it serves the service industry better and best. And so, therefore, you have no other choice but to be pro capitalist. But there's a very interesting chapter, I think it was chapter 10 or chapter 9 in Anthony Bourdain's second book, uh, Medium Raw, where he actually talks about how the restaurant world does not need to be so dependent on whether we have a bullish economy or not. Because if we do that, then the restaurant industry would exactly go into the tailspin that it went into in 2008. In other words, the innovation and the creativity that came out of that economic fallout with people going to do food trucks. Um, he threw out the idea of people doing those sort of hawker malls. If you've been to Asia, which I have not, but my wife has at least 3 times in the last 4 years, if you go to I think it's Malaysia or Singapore, one of the two, they've got these big, huge mall. They, in other words, they're basically like when you think of the food court in a mall, but it's all the building is dedicated to just different food stalls. That's what they have out there. So, but this is all like, but in other words, you have to be creative if you are dealing with a when capitalism takes its ever so predictable nosedives. It doesn't mean that the food industry has to die because of it. So yeah. Oh shit. Hold on. Damn, a lot of what's going on. Pure Butterfly Spirit says, I want to create a travel channel. That's a good idea. Pure Butterfly Spirit. Brooklyn T Corner says, I love Chef. He's a sweet guy. Curious says, they identify with the oppressor, internalized classism, which is unfortunate because the wait staff, if anything, they're just workers like everybody else. So yeah, but I get the bitterness, to be honest with you. Yeah, when the economy doesn't do well, people like assholes, and they are assholes for this, try to justify not tipping people because the economy's bad. Well, if the economy's that bad, you shouldn't be going out to eat. If the economy is bad, like on the rare occasion when my wife and I were struggling more and more financially, and our kids were still young, it was a big deal for us to go out to eat when we did. And when we did it, I mean, we went out to eat. We knew that we needed to cover everything, including a decent tip for the waitress and waiter or waiter. So you just got to be that way. But anyway, Phoenix says curious is very dirty and hard work. You've got to be able to throw a shovel 30 feet up loaded with cement. I bet. Pure Butterfly Spirit says, I'm trying to see how I want to go about it. She's talking about her travel channel. Curious says, in other countries, they are like, here's your food, but smiling and flirting with you is not necessary for me to earn a living. Well, first of all, that I agree 100%. I don't tip people because they smiled and flirted with me. Matter of fact, I will take a grim faced, rude waiter, not rude, but I would take a grim faced waiter who doesn't try to do small talk with me any day, as long as that waiter is, I see the waiter is making sure that the food is getting out to me, that they're checking in with us, that kinds of shit, because that's what I base a tip on. And I've actually tipped well for people who've done a little bit less than that, but that's just me. I'm a softy when it comes to waiters and waitresses and cooks and stuff. um Phoenix says, right. So Curious says Phoenix, and the cement I assume is heavy. Pure Butterfly Spirit says, thank you, Brooklyn. You're very uplifting. Yes, Brooklyn's channel is very uplifting. Phoenix channel says, Phoenix Chastain says, Brooklyn, I'm impressed with how responsive Chef Orel is. Brooklyn T Corner says, curious if I get it wholeheartedly. I'm so behind now. I'm gonna have to just go on down anyway. Curious says, a Brooklyn Tea Corner. Yes, there are ways for restaurants to curb harassment. There was a recent article about a woman run establishment with a color coding system to alert about harassment. Yeah. Yeah, I never understood the idea of male customers who feel I'm it's a shame. It's a shame Jenny had stepped out because I know that Jenny had bartended and waitered, and I'm gonna probably do this particular topic as a part one, because in other words, as a part two, because everybody's coming up with all these great stories about the jobs that they've had, and this is exactly the conversation that I wanted to have. And that's why I dropped the link. I know the link disappeared, but now I really have to go. So I want to thank everybody for showing up. I want to thank Pure Butterfly Spirit and Curious and Brooklyn Tea Corner, and Baby Moscato came in, but she had to go because she was tired, which is understandable. I did start late, but I got to go. Um, Brooklyn says, curious if they come out with an alert system, we need one for my job so people can stop asking me for subway and bridge directions. Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to thank you all, and I'm going to do a part two to this, not next week, but probably week after next. I'll make sure to start as early as possible. Throw the link in. I think people should get some liquid courage if they want, but I want to hear some more of these job stories because I think this is important, or rather, it's important to me. Curious says, by the way, Garage, I wanted to tell you about John Africa and the group Move. Very interesting. Yeah, yeah. Phoenix says, sorry, I came late, GA. Hope you don't stay gone for long. What? No, I'm not gonna be gone for long. I'm gonna be here next week. And I'm gonna be making some videos and stuff. But I mean, I just gotta get off to today. I got an early start tomorrow. Brooklyn T. Corner says, you're welcome, Garage. Good night, sir. Curious as John Africa has been classified as an anarcho-primitivist. Yes, the Move movement was, they were a black anarcho-primitivist organization. His teachings emphasized the importance of all life and the ways in which vegetarianism, raw food, and communal living. Yeah, he did hit on a lot of these things before all that stuff became trendy. You're correct, Curious. You have that right. So you know what? I'm going to talk to you about that and see if you could record some of these things about Move, and and hopefully I can probably upload it to the channel. All right, y'all. Thank you so much. I got to go. Peace. This is the Garage Autonomist, and this is part one, jobs we've had. And I will be broadcasting, or we're going to do another attempt at this where I'm not going to be so much yammering on about myself. This way, I'll be just dropping the link in the next part two. Everybody can start off and talk about it. So we'll do that Thursday after next. Jobs we've had part two for the audience. Peace. This is the Garage Autonomist.